It was an afternoon soaked in thunderclouds. The skies over Mbali City rumbled low, and the rain fell like the heavens were weeping. Zola, clad in a fitted ivory dress and tall beaded heels, stood stiffly beside her expensive Zabeka sedan, stranded awkwardly along a quiet roadside. One of the tires had blown without warning, and to her dismay, her phone screen had just gone black, battery drained, signal gone with the storm. Raindrops now beat down harder, slapping the metal of her car like impatient fingers. Her shoulders tightened as each passing car swished by, not even slowing to check. Zola muttered under her breath, cursing her luck while trying to shield herself beneath the car's open door. She didn't notice that, from behind a sagging billboard covered in old election posters, someone was watching her. A few meters away, under a crooked shelter of flattened cartons and worn tarpaulin, Cato sat. His clothes clung to his frame, soaked in places, but his posture was strangely proud, as if the rain didn't dare wash away what dignity he had left. He looked no older than 30, with tangled dreadlocks, a patchy beard, and eyes that had seen too much. He'd been watching Zola for some time, curious, cautious. People like her rarely looked kindly on men like him. Still, something about her shivering form moved him. He hesitated, wiped his hands on his tattered trousers, and stepped into the rain. His approach was quiet, respectful. He didn't want to startle her. "Need help with that tire?" he asked, voice firm but gentle. Zola turned sharply, startled. Her eyes scanned him, the clothes, the dirt, the smell of damp earth. Instinctively, she stepped back. Her mind screamed no, but her heart paused. There was no malice in his eyes, just calm, a calm that somehow cut through the storm. After a few tense seconds, she nodded, half regretfully. "If you know what you're doing, be my guest." Cato gave a slight smile, not smug, just familiar, and bent down to assess the damage. Zola slid into the front seat, arms wrapped around herself, watching from behind the windshield as the man worked in silence. Rain trickled down his neck as he loosened the bolts, lifted the car with the jack from her trunk, and rolled the spare into place. His hands moved with speed and certainty, like someone who'd done this many times before. "You've done this before," she said, finally breaking the silence. Still crouched, he nodded. "Used to fix cars in Bagoma garage, long time ago." That piqued her curiosity, but she held her tongue. He finished the task, stood up, and wiped his oily palms on his already stained trousers. "You're set," he said simply. Zola stepped out and looked at the fixed tire, then at him. She reached for her handbag, pulling out a few folded bills. But before she could hand them over, Cato raised his hand. "No need. Just glad I could help." That stopped her cold. No plea, no hungry eyes, no following her as she left. Just that same quiet strength. She stood there awkwardly for a moment, lips parting, then whispered, "Thank you." And just like that, she drove off. But she couldn't shake the image of him. As the wipers danced across her windshield, Zola kept seeing his eyes. They weren't full of need or bitterness. They were steady, unshaken, real. The next morning, in her glass-walled office overlooking the rainy cityscape, Zola sat curled in her leather chair, a hot mug of chai tangawizi in her hands. Her assistant spoke about meetings, but she barely listened. Cato's face kept returning to her mind. She had met polished men in expensive suits, men who dripped charm like honey, but none of them had looked at her the way Cato had. No calculation, no pretense. By noon, she grabbed her coat and headed out, back near the old billboard. The rain had dried, but Cato was nowhere to be seen. Zola sat in her car for nearly half an hour, scanning the streets, hoping. Finally, disheartened, she drove off. From behind a leaning tin shack, Cato saw her leave, confusion flickering in his eyes. Why had she returned? Days passed. Zola found herself thinking of him often. That weekend, driven by something she couldn't name, she returned, this time not in heels, but in flats, with a canvas bag over her shoulder. Inside it, a hot meal of pilaf, fried plantains, and a small portable power bank. She walked the narrow lanes around the old diner, eyes alert. And then she saw him, sitting on a crate, back against a brick wall, sketching something on a torn cardboard sheet with a dull pencil. "I wasn't sure I'd find you," she said. Cato didn't look up. "Didn't expect you to come looking." She stepped closer and held out the bag. He eyed it for a moment, then took it quietly. When he opened it and saw the meal, his eyes widened a little. "From Mama Chico's? That place is fancy." Zola shrugged, smiling. "You helped me." Seemed fair. They sat side by side on the curb, eating in silence. Cars passed, music drifted from the diner kitchen, and somewhere a child laughed. Finally, Zola spoke. "What happened to you?" Cato looked at her, not surprised by the question. His voice was calm when he replied, "Life, one mistake, then another. Then people stopped seeing you." His words were soft, but heavy. No anger, just tired truth. Zola looked at him, really looked. For the first time, she didn't see the dirt or the patches on his jacket. She saw someone the world had tossed aside, but not broken. "I can drop you somewhere?" She offered gently. Cato shook his head. "I'm all right," but she insisted. They drove slowly through the city as the sun dipped low. Wind teased Zola's hair and tugged gently at Cato's coat. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was easy. He told her where to go, a high hill outside the main roads. They parked under a jacaranda tree, its purple flowers scattered like stars. "I come here," he said, gazing over the blinking lights of the city below. "Makes me feel seen." Zola watched his profile in the dim light. The strong jaw, the quiet dignity, the man who had changed her tire and refused her money. "You shouldn't be living like this," she whispered, not sure if he even heard. Cato didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing patchwork of city lights far below, as though they held secrets only he could understand. Zola reached quietly into her purse and pulled out the small power bank she had brought along, gently offering it to him with a soft smile. "So your phone never dies," she said, almost teasing. Cato took it with cautious hands, surprise flickering across his face like lightning behind clouds. "You're not like the others," he murmured, voice low. "Most people with big cars and fancy watches look right through us." Zola leaned back against her seat, her gaze rising to the scattered stars peeking through the retreating clouds. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending too," she replied, more to herself than to him. A week later, Cato walked into a small cafe tucked between two kiosks selling woven baskets and ripe mangoes, his hair neater, his face freshly washed, and wearing a plain button shirt and jeans that Zola had handed him in a carefully wrapped bundle. She was already seated by the window, the sunlight catching the gold in her earrings, and when she saw him, she waved like they'd known each other forever. "You look good," she said, as he took a seat opposite her. "Still smell like Bali streets though," he joked, and she laughed freely. They spoke for hours, the world outside blurring as they lost track of time. She shared her obsession with vintage cars. He told stories of his days in garages long before the streets became home. They talked about her distant family she no longer called and his broken one he couldn't find anymore. Zola, who had built walls with diamonds and wit, let someone in for the first time in years. Cato didn't try to charm her. He didn't perform. He simply listened, deeply, quietly, and when he spoke, his words landed like seeds in soft earth. As they finished their drinks, Zola asked something bold, her voice light but intent. "Why don't you come work with me?" Cato blinked. Confused, "Doing what?" "Fixing cars," she said. "You're good. I'll pay you. You just need a chance." He stared, unsure whether this was charity or something else, but what he saw in her eyes wasn't pity, it was belief. Zola had a small side garage behind her estate, long forgotten and covered in dust. Within a week, Cato had moved into the modest guest house beside it and was already transforming the garage into a working space again. He swept out years of grime, arranged tools with the care of a craftsman, and repaired the sagging workbench with his own hands. The place began to hum with life. Word spread like dry wind through the neighborhood. The quiet mechanic behind Zola's house could fix anything. People came with old pickups, broken scooters, and rusty engines. Cato worked quickly, cleanly, and never overcharged. He didn't talk much to clients, just nodded, smiled, and did his job like it meant something. Zola often stood behind the kitchen window, sipping iced baobab juice, watching him with a quiet pride. Something warm had started to take root, not just in the garage, but in her chest. Cato, with his silences and scars, was slowly becoming the best part of her day. But not everyone welcomed the change. Her childhood friend Vanessa noticed the subtle shifts, the glances, the lingering smiles. One afternoon at brunch, over grilled tilapia and coconut rice, Vanessa leaned in and whispered, "You're getting too close to that mechanic. People are starting to talk." Zola rolled her eyes. Let them. But the whispers grew louder. Her ex-boyfriend, Victor, stormed into her office without warning, his cologne choking the room. "So it's true?" he scoffed. "You're dating some guy off the street? Are you trying to destroy your name?" Zola stood, her expression calm, like steel under silk. "I'd rather be with someone real than a man who hides behind bank accounts and fake smiles." Victor laughed bitterly and stormed out, but she didn't flinch. For once, she was choosing what made her feel alive, not what looked perfect on paper. Cato noticed the storm circling her, though she never told him. He worked late into the night one evening, shirt peeled off in the heat, sweat shining on his back as he bent over a cherry-red convertible. Zola stepped into the garage with a glass of lemonade, but paused at the door, watching him move, strong, focused, almost beautiful in the glow of a single overhead bulb. She turned to leave quietly, but he saw her. "Hey, come in," he called. She sat on a stool nearby, sipping the drink slowly. "You ever think of starting your own place?" she asked. Cato sighed, leaning on the car. "I used to dream about it, but dreams need money." Zola bit her lip, hesitant. "What if I helped?" His gaze snapped to hers, serious now. "Zola, I don't want your money." "I know," she said gently. I believe in you." Silence fell like night around them, heavy and close. Then Cato whispered, "You shouldn't," but neither looked away. The only sound was the tick-tick of metal cooling. He slid to the floor and leaned against the wall, and without a word, Zola joined him, shoulders brushing, the contact electric. She looked at him, her heart racing, unsure if it was the warmth of the night or something far deeper rising in her chest. "I didn't expect this," she said quietly. "Meeting you. Feeling safe with you." Cato turned, eyes wide. "Safe with me?" She nodded. "More than I ever did with men in suits who smiled while stabbing backs." He laughed under his breath, almost disbelieving. "That's a first." Their faces inched closer, gravity drawing them in. Cato paused, breath uneven. Zola's lips were close enough to count the freckles on her cheeks. But just as they were about to touch, her phone buzzed violently in her purse, slicing the moment open. She pulled back, startled. I have to take this," she murmured, rising quickly. Cato nodded silently, watching her leave, the moment slipping through his fingers like oil on metal. His heart beat heavy, not sure if it was hope or warning. Zola couldn't sleep that night. Her body lay still in her silk sheets, but her mind spun like a wheel in the mud, caught in the pull of something she couldn't name. What had almost happened in that garage lingered like thunder after lightning. Not just the near kiss, but the feeling that had wrapped around her chest like vines. Was she falling? Could she fall for someone she barely knew? Yet everything about Cato felt less like a stranger and more like a home she had never realized was missing. Across the yard, in the quiet shadows outside the guest house, Cato paced slowly under the moonlight, barefoot on the stone path, his heart pounding with confusion. He hated the warmth blooming in his chest, hated it because he knew he had nothing to give her. No grand future, no family name, no riches to stand on. Just his calloused hands, the grease under his fingernails, and a heart that was already cracking open. He knew that if he let go, he'd fall deeply, completely. And she, with her elegance and light, didn't belong in his storm-rattled world. The next morning, he kept his distance. When Zola stopped by the garage with a hopeful smile, Cato looked away and said, "Got a lot to fix today." His words were short, cool. She noticed the shift instantly, how he didn't meet her eyes, but she didn't press, though it stung far more than she expected. Her birthday approached, and her friends expected champagne fountains and a rooftop dinner, but she surprised them all by saying, "Just a small gathering at home." Vanessa raised a sculpted eyebrow, smirking. "Don't tell me it's because of your mechanic friend." Zola stayed silent, and that silence said everything. Days later, her fingers trembled as she slipped a folded invitation under Cato's door. It read simply, "You don't have to come, just if you want to." Cato stared at the invite like it was a riddle. It had been years since anyone had asked him to something that wasn't about work or need. The night of the party, Zola stood radiant, in a flowing dress that shimmered like rain on river stones, but her eyes kept flicking toward the door. Just as her hope began to wilt, the door opened, and there he was, clean-shaven, unsure, wearing a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit but carried dignity all the same. The room buzzed with whispers. Who's he? Is he with the staff? Did she invite him? Zola didn't care. All she saw was Cato. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the world went mute. He gave a shy wave. She walked to him, heart thudding. "You clean up nice," she teased. "You. Look." Cato stumbled for words, then smiled, soft and honest. Like a dream, they laughed, awkward, real. She handed him a drink, and they found a quieter corner away from polished stares and sharp tongues. But Vanessa followed, her smile all sugar and poison. "So, Cato, what do you do when you're not under a car?" He met her eyes calmly. "I read. I think. I try not to starve." Vanessa gave a hollow laugh, but Zola's glare silenced her. Cato had held his ground, and Zola loved him more for it. As the evening faded into soft music and fairy lights twinkled in the garden, Cato wandered out, away from noise, staring up at the stars like they were old friends. Zola joined him barefoot, heels in hand. "Knew I'd find you here," she said. He smiled. "Too much glitter in there." She laughed. "Same." A slow song drifted from inside, and without a word, she held out her hand. "Dance with me." He hesitated, then nodded, taking her hand like it was something sacred. They swayed under the night sky, bodies close, hearts speaking in silence. For a few golden minutes, there was no mansion, no poverty, no past, just two people lost in something that felt dangerously close to forever. As the song ended, Zola rested her head against his chest, and Cato closed his eyes. He was drowning, and he didn't want to be saved. The next morning, he packed. He left the guest house quietly and placed a folded note on the workbench in the garage. "Thank you for everything. I can't stay. You deserve more." Then he vanished. When Zola found the note, her hands trembled. "No," she whispered, breath catching, "not like this." She searched the streets, the hill, the alley where they first met. She asked around, offered food, described him to strangers. Nothing. Days passed. Her calls rang out into silence. She buried herself in work, threw herself into meetings, wore a mask of control, but her eyes betrayed her every time they glanced. At the now lifeless garage, 2 weeks crawled by. Then, without warning, Cato walked in one morning, moving through the garage door like nothing had happened. Zola was already there, staring at an untouched engine with hollow eyes. She turned. Stunned. "Where have you been?" He looked worn, shadows under his eyes. "I needed to think." Her voice cracked. "You left. No goodbye." He stepped closer. "Because I was falling for you, and I knew if I stayed, I'd ruin it." Tears gathered in her eyes. "You already have, and now you're here. Why?" Cato reached out, gently taking her hand. In his rough, familiar grip. "Because no matter how far I ran, my heart." A plot of land on the outskirts of the city. Overgrown, unused, but his. Damon stood there frozen, the paper trembling in his hand, as if afraid it would vanish. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The man clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Your father always believed you'd do something good." After the man left, Damon just sat in silence, the deed crumpled in his palm, unable to understand how the past he had buried so long ago had returned with a gift. That night, Zola found him sitting on the garage floor, back against the tool cabinet, staring into nothing. "You okay?" she asked softly, crouching beside him. He looked at her, eyes glistening. I think I have a future now." She didn't say anything, just leaned her head on his shoulder, and together they dreamed out loud, not just of survival, but of building. Weeks passed. Damon started sketching out plans on scraps of paper, a real garage, maybe a small cafe next door, a space for kids to learn trades. Zola helped with every part of it, filing permits, visiting the land, picking out local artists to paint the walls. It was no longer just a vision. It was becoming real. One evening, under a marula tree near the land, Damon knelt down. Not with a ring, but with the carved sculpture of the woman he had made months ago. "You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me back my name. I don't know how to love perfectly, but I will love you honestly." Zola knelt too, took the sculpture in her arms, and whispered, "That's all I ever needed." They didn't need crowds or cameras. Just hands held, hearts open, and a sky full of stars. From strangers on a rainy road to soulmates who built something beautiful from broken pieces. Their story became a quiet legend in the city, whispered in cafes, told in garages, and remembered by every passerby who saw a carved woman standing in the shop window, arms wide open, hair blowing. Behind her, just like love that doesn't care where you come from, only where you're willing to go. The letter was worn, edges yellowed with time, but the words inside it cut straight through Damon's soul, written by a father he thought had long forgotten him. It spoke of love never spoken aloud, hopes never shared, and a wish that one day Damon would find peace. As he sat in stunned silence, Zola read beside him, and for the first time in a life marked by struggle, Damon cried not from sorrow, but from healing. The property deed included in the envelope was humble, just a neglected plot with a crumbling shed, but to Damon, it was a doorway. "What if we turn this into something?" he asked, eyes lighting with a rare spark. "A place for people like me, like I was. Not just to fix cars, but to fix life." Zola's face lit up as if the idea had been waiting for them all. Along, together, they poured themselves into it. Damon laid each brick with purpose, and Zola brought the vision to life, designing spaces that felt warm, human, and full of second chances. When they hung the wooden sign over the door, it read, "Second Chance Garage." Damon was nervous, not about the business, but something bigger. He had no ring, no violin quartet waiting, just his truth. One quiet night, he led Zola to the garage, lit with soft candles and string lights swaying in the breeze. "Check the back tire," he said with a grin. She rolled her eyes but played along, only to find a wrench tied with a ribbon and a note that read, "Wanna fix hearts together forever?" When she turned, Eyes wide and mouth open, Damon was already on one knee, hands trembling. "I may not have much," he said, voice cracking. "But if you say yes, I'll spend my whole life loving you better every day." She didn't let him finish. Laughing through tears, she threw her arms around him and whispered, "Yes," 1,000 times. Yes. But not all hearts cheered. Vanessa made one final bitter attempt to destroy what she could not understand. She leaked old photos of Damon sleeping on benches, scavenging through dumpsters, hoping to shame him and make Zola walk away. But Zola answered with fire. She posted the photos herself with the caption, "This is Damon. This is strength. This is survival. This is who I love." The post spread like wildfire. People didn't mock Damon, they admired him. His story became a beacon, and Vanessa, stripped of her cruelty's power, quietly left town. No one followed. No one cared. Damon and Zola were married in a sunlit garden with wildflowers in jars and real friends by their side. Zola wore a simple cotton gown, the same blazer he'd once worn nervously to her birthday. Their vows weren't perfect, but they were true. "I used to have no home," Damon said, eyes wet. "Now I have you. You're everything I didn't know I needed." Zola smiled through tears, replying, "You didn't just fix my car, Damon. You fixed me." They kissed under the sound of laughter and birdsong, not a fairy tale. Better, it was real. They moved into a modest house near the garage, no marble, no chandeliers, but full of color, mismatched cups, music, and joy. Damon cooked. Zola painted. They danced barefoot in the kitchen when their song played, burned toast without guilt, and built a love rooted in the sacredness of the ordinary. One day, Zola handed Damon a wrapped box. "It's not my birthday," he said, confused. "Just open it," she grinned. Inside was a framed photo, a wooden bench, the very one where he had once slept through cold nights. Only now it bore a plaque that read, "Where strength rested before it stood tall." She had found it, preserved it, and turned it into a tribute. Damon held it, breathless. "You remembered," he whispered. She kissed his cheek and replied, "I remember everything that made you who you are." He hugged her tightly, knowing in that moment he needed nothing more from the world. Months later, while sorting through her old journals, Zola came across a page written before her tire had ever gone flat. "I wish someone would just see me," it read. "Not the money. Not the name, just me." She smiled. A few pages later, scrawled in a hurried, smudged hand, were the words, "I found him. He sees me." She looked across the room and saw Damon bent over a small engine, humming softly. He looked up, winked, and her heart danced, just like it did that first time. One evening, there was a knock at the garage door. A young woman stood there, flustered. "My car, it just died down the street," she said, embarrassed. Damon walked out, wiping his hands, calm as ever. "Need a hand?" She nodded, relieved. Zola stepped beside him, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't worry. You're in good hands." As they opened the hood together, the girl looked around the space, the warmth, the smells of oil and coffee, the laughter echoing faintly from the back room, and said, "This place. It feels different, like more than a garage." Zola smiled. "That's because it is." And as Damon leaned over the engine, he glanced at the very spot where, once upon a rain-soaked afternoon, he had stood cold and invisible, hoping for a hand, for a sign, for something. Now he was the one, reaching out. Because sometimes, when you help someone fix their road, you end up finding your own. And that's exactly what they had done.